Dawson goes through, makes a wonderful break. He's tackled 15 metres from the line. Backs there. Wilkinson will drop for goal. There's offside surely against England. No, Martin Johnson has it. He drives. There's 35 seconds to go. This is the one. It's coming back for Johnny Wilkinson. He drops for World Cup glory.
Yes!
It's up. It's over. He's done it. Johnny Wilkinson is England's hero yet again. And there's no time for Australia to come back.
On the 22nd of November 2003, Johnny Wilkinson made my birthday by winning England the World Cup with that drop goal. This was the culmination of 4 years of preparation and work, where England had honed their strategies in order to get themselves upfield into a position where they could score points in as many ways as possible. Kicking, running the ball, it didn't matter. They were able to get upfield, and once they were upfield, they were able to take their points as efficiently as possible by you-know-who, the boot of Johnny Wilkinson. When everything had dried up, Johnny Wilkinson could get them points. Now, as successful as this strategy is, it was never just limited to England. A trip down memory lane will show us Joel Stransky and his drop goal in the clutch stages against New Zealand in 1995. It will show us Rob Andrew knocking out the Wallabies in the 1995 World Cup also. It will show us Yanni de Beer and his 5 drop goals against England in the quarter-final of the World Cup in 1999. And in more recent times, we see the 2015 All Blacks, in my opinion one of the greatest try-scoring teams of all time, resorting to the drop goal in these tight situations in order to get the win. It was imperative against South Africa and imperative against the Wallabies as well. As we can see, leading into the last 10 minutes, New Zealand were only leading by 4 points, and therefore Carter's drop goal took them within range of a converted try. The key beauty of these situations was that they were all tight, pressure, knockout situations. If we have a look back, you can see the imperative nature in terms of the scorelines of how important these drop goals were to the final score. 2-point, 3-point leads, it was marginal. So, when England brought back the drop goal with an absolute obsession in Rugby World Cup 2023, they were bringing back ways to win tight, pressure, knockout games, and we saw how close they actually came to it. At its heart, however, this all comes back to Steve Borthwick's philosophy, the one we discussed in the New England Way video, of scoring points. Back in 2022, I actually had a conversation with my boss regarding the drop goal, as I thought we should actually be implementing it more because the rate of being held up now is so high, and therefore when an attack gets bogged down, it may be better to take the drop. Leading on from this, we should remember there are 3 methods to score: tries and conversions, penalties, and drop goals. I know this is quite a simpler video than I normally do, but trust me, I think it's actually pretty important when we get down into it. The drop goal is responsible for the second sweetest thing that I have seen this year, second only to the drop pod sequence from Helldivers 2. Ah, sweet liberty. Now, I want to paint a picture of how I was and what my mindset was in this moment. I was in a pub up London, 4 pints down with one of my best mates, and both of us were going absolutely crazy. England had just pulled off a magnificent attacking display and had quite rightly showed they could very easily score tries, and they had the advantage. And yet, I was screaming drop goal. I was screaming drop goal like absolutely no one's business. There was this girl on the table next to us who was saying, "Why, play the advantage, take the try." And I just didn't care. When this drop goal went over, I was happier than I would have been if we'd scored another try. And at the time, I had no idea why. I had absolutely no idea why at the time. It wasn't the jubilation, it wasn't winning the drop goal at the end, it took a while to figure out. But when I did, it kind of clocked as to why this was so important. As we know, there are 3 ways to score: tries and conversions, penalties and drop goals. Most teams are just good at 2. Not many teams are good at 3. A team that doesn't regularly practice a key way with which to score points has an innate disadvantage. Forget about how marginal close games are and how effective that the drop goal can be in these situations. It's just about getting another way with which to score points. This drop goal set a margin with which meant Bath couldn't take a penalty at the end. And here, with Marcus Smith, off a goal line dropout, he takes a drop goal straight down the middle of the field, sending Harlequins more than 7 points ahead of Racing 92 away. To put it mildly, it is another dimension with which to win. And this was shown no better than in a game back in 2018 that I remembered when England were going up against Ireland in that final minute. This game was New Zealand versus South Africa in 2018 in the Rugby Championship. This game was a game in which Rassie said if he lost, he would resign as Springboks coach. Now, whether that is actually true is another matter for discussion, but the key thing is, South Africa were in total control of this game, but then New Zealand worked their way to this position. From this position, they are perfectly able to drop the goal and go for a win. They've got the bonus point, there's no need for a try, but they fell victim to their DNA. All Black rugby is the simple basics done to an exceptionally high level, which results in offloads and continuation and support lines and beautiful play like this. Now, before I get crucified, I have to say I'm not bashing attacking rugby. Seriously, after I released the New England Way video, I got tons of comments saying, oh, you don't think attacking rugby is relevant, you don't think it can win, and I never said that. I even said to be a complete team, you need a ball-in-hand attack now, but it usually comes after the development of your set piece and your foundations. The game has to be balanced, perfectly balanced, as all things should be. Going back to this situation, however, this is the situation the All Blacks found themselves in. And what do? They go for the try. They go for the try against the South African defence, and the South Africans force an error. And therefore, they regather the ball, they kick it out, and they win the game. Now, knowing this, if we rewind that situation back to this point and we ask any fan, what should we do now? I think we'd get the accurate answer of what should be done, but it wasn't. They went for the try, and as such, we're talking about shoulda, woulda, coulda, for a game that was easily winnable. In 2012, the All Blacks made the right decision. Drawing against Ireland, less than a minute to go, rather than go for a try they don't need, they take the drop goal and they win. This shows a level of maturity and composure that could have been used 6 years later, but instead, we're talking about a South African revival, 2 World Cups, and Rassie staying in his post. Your DNA is important, key even, but sometimes you have to know when to play outside of it, as sometimes that awareness will give you a much better chance for the win. This game was more than just a win, and we have to acknowledge it as such. Like South Africa in 2018, it shouldn't be treated as a win. It should be treated as how it was intended. It should be treated as an announcement. This is a young England team, and yet this win showed intelligence and a change in mindset, but the nerve to take the win. Not just be given it, but to take the win. And this is one of the reasons why I was so happy that the drop goal was taken to get that win. We are at the start of a Rugby World Cup cycle. 2027 is one of the key things that Steve Borthwick will be aiming towards, and the World Cup application of drop goals is history written. As such, let's take a look at why the drop goal is so influential in World Cup rugby. Now, as Steve Borthwick knows from his time under Clive Woodward, World Cups tend to be very hard-fought affairs, and therefore points are an absolute premium. However, whilst drop goals are exceptionally important in getting points in tight-scoring affairs, it's not the only reason they're so prominent in World Cup rugby. There is a key reason why drop goals are so effective, and I'll actually let someone who's actually been in the coalface of World Cup rugby to explain this to you.
World Cups are a keeps, you remember it, and we're sitting here now 10 years later talking about it. It's all about pressure, handle that pressure, find a way. And it, is the referee going to make we had a chance to push them over in the first half, and we'd have pushed them over in a scrum, because they had they'd lost their best tight head, they weren't the greatest scrum at the time. But when he gave us a second penalty, my choice is he going to give the penalty try? Because they won't, they'll collapse it, and they'll make him make the penalty try call. Is he going to give that against Australia in a World Cup final in their home stadium? My feeling was no, he wouldn't. No, he wouldn't. He'd find a way not to give it, which would be to penalise us, which he did later on in that situation. So we'll kick the goal and take the points. We'll take it into our control, not yours. So is the referee going to make that choice? And that's no, I don't think he's going to make that big call. So we're going to have to. Is he going to give the penalty in front of the sticks? History shows us no, he probably wouldn't. He said he would afterwards.
Sandre Watson.
Yeah, they were offside. That last play of the game, they were hugely offside. He didn't put his hand up and give Johnny the benefit of a second shot, which he should have done. So there's pressure all round, right? It's the human, the refs under pressure like everyone else, and more so.
When Jono says World Cup wins are about finding a way, imagine how much easier it is to find a way when you have 3 confident ways of scoring rather than 2. There's a reason thinking correctly under pressure was a key mantra of England in 2003. Pressure can affect everyone on a pitch, be it the players, the coaches, and the referee, doubly so the referee, because he's on his own out there. We don't know exactly what happened here, but as Jono said, there was a clear offside by the Australian players in Phil War here, and Andre Watson did say he would have gone back for the penalty, but he didn't raise his arm. Because there was no advantage, Wilkinson was taking the game. He wasn't being given the game, he was taking the game. And this is completely different in every way to any other score, and is why the drop goal is so lethal, in my opinion. You see, if you concede a try, it usually means with the brilliance of modern defences, someone made a mistake. Exactly the same principle for a penalty. If someone makes a mistake, that means it's something you can fix. You convene under the sticks, get in the huddle and talk about how no one breaks that channel again, or if it's a system issue, what you need to do to fix it. Against the drop goal, however, there's nothing you can do. There is nothing to fix. You can do nothing about it, and that is the danger of a drop goal. It's not that we are giving them the game via mistakes and penalties, it's that they are taking the game. In the Marcus Smith drop goal, Racing 92 have just escaped. They're kicking a goal line dropout, and the mindset is aggression. Let's reset, chase hard as a line, smash them back, pressure their breakdown, and generate a turnover pen with our brilliant athletes. Marcus simply goes, nah, I don't think I'm going to let you do that. And he drops a goal, scoring 3 points. Not only have Racing not escaped now, but can you imagine how demoralising that is? Racing have gone from offensive aggression to conceding points with little to no effort. And that horrible feeling of, if they're good enough, there is nothing we can do to stop them. As a defence, you could be playing great and still have points scored against you. You may even want to be defending. There in the pouring rain, France are happy to defend because they want England to attack, as they want to force an error, but with this in your arsenal, you take that away from them. It was exactly the same for South Africa. The Boks have a well-drilled, disciplined defence that forces errors and penalties at a record rate, so they want you to attack so they can get penalties. England don't give it to them, going only 2 phases before taking the drop goal to Owen Farrell. This means South Africa have only 2 phases to force a knock-on or a pen, which they do not get. This buys into a model that I learnt about many moons ago during my time with the military. Now this is the model of fighting power, and the drop goal fills it pretty well. The model of fighting power constitutes the components necessary to win a war, and is made up of the conceptual, how we fight, the physical, what we have to fight, and moral, why we fight. Now, if you want to disrupt an enemy's ability to fight, the first component you attack is the moral. One of the greatest minds of warfare in history, Napoleon Bonaparte, said that in war the moral is to the physical as 3 to 1. You want to target your opponent's morale. You want to target their will to fight. That is key, and it happened comprehensively in 1999. Nick Mallett's kicking strategy, combined with spoiling of early phase ball, was designed to counter England's back row threat and led to field position, with which Yanni de Beer scored 5 drop goals in 15 minutes. Just listen to the impact this had.
Helpless feeling, because they actually set them up really well as well, and they were getting momentum. They were taking the ball up and then giving De Beer a lot of time, and we couldn't get anywhere near him. And at the end of the game, you think, is it 3, is it 5? How many did he kick? You couldn't remember how many he put over him.
De Beer again with the drop goal. Unbelievable!
The 5 drop goals was probably in a space of about 20 minutes. Now that's 15 points against you without doing anything wrong. It's difficult. It must have been demoralizing for them to be there and see that you're not doing anything wrong, but points get scored against you. That's probably what makes a drop goal unique in that sense. You can go out there and play 100% correct and then still get points against you.
The damage this caused is huge. It arguably broke England, and I don't think we've ever heard Martin Johnson ever use the word helpless to define a situation he's been in anywhere else. Bringing this back to modern day and its recent application with England, Steve Borthwick knew that to hurt South Africa, he had to damage their morale, which he did via targeting the way that South Africa fights. South Africa wanted points to hit in defence. Kicking the ball away took that away from them. They wanted lineouts and mauls in their half. England disrupted the lineouts and disrupted the mauls, stopping that at source. They wanted scrums with which to earn penalties. England stopped them, at least for 60 minutes. And lastly, they wanted field position, which England took away from them with their kicking game. Then once they're in this position, South Africa know that they have to be squeaky clean, but even if they're not, England have the skill to take the points via 3 ways, not just 2. What did this result in?
Wat het ek nou gemaak? Ons gaan na huis toe gaan.
Now, Rassi and co were able to stop this with their own MFP, and through sensational leadership, established how they had to strike. The concept, obviously, was the scrum. The physical component, Oxen Che and RG Snyman, and lastly the moral component for South Africa. This resulted in, well, we know what it resulted in. It resulted in scrum dominance, penalty after penalty, and South Africa got back in the game. But the ability to take drop goals, not only did it allow England more than one score ahead, but South Africa knew as a result, field position was lethal, and mentally that can have an effect. Now, we've talked enough about what drop goals offer, how they can damage the opposition score-wise, mentally, and how they can take away key strengths of the opposition. But what we haven't discussed is what is actually needed in terms of temperament, skill, and structure to execute a successful drop goal. Let's show you what has worked in the past, but also what we believe will be essential to it working in the future. Let's get into it. Now, there are a number of considerations to make when taking a drop goal. Now, have a little note of what Alex Mitchell was doing here, pointing to a forward pod. But moving on from this, you don't have long nowadays to take a drop goal, because the setup is often so obvious. Now, I know it just looks here as if the ball's passed back to Fordy and he makes a miraculous drop goal, getting another 3 points for England, but there's a lot more to it than that. You see, for a drop goal to be successful, at least in the traditional sense, you need a couple of things in play for your kicker to have the best chance of making the drop. The primary thing you need in a traditional setup is depth for your kicker. He needs to be far enough back that the charge down options have no chance to get to him. Secondly, you need dummy options / blockers, or players who can actually take the pass off 9 and therefore must be respected until the ball goes behind them to the 10. Once the ball is behind them, their role is to disrupt the charge down options from reaching the favourite foot of the kicker with which they kick goals. They are allowed to stand their ground, therefore they are key to disrupting these charge down options. Lastly, the kicker will position themselves on the side of the field that gives them the best chance of making the shot. If they're right-footed, they'll usually be to the left-hand side of the posts. If they're left-footed, they'll usually position to the right-hand side. This can be modifiable, down to the 10's preference, but simplified, these are the usual factors that are considered when going into a traditional drop goal setup. Now, in terms of recent drop goal redemption arcs, there's no way that we can't mention Kieran Frawley. We can probably remember the last gasp drop goal attempt against Toulouse. He has the depth, but lack of blockers and wrong side of the field for the boot, and as a consequence, the ball fades to the left. If he's on the right, it maybe curves in. But if we have a look here, there's not much structure in terms of a drop goal setup. Now, Leinster are a try-scoring team. I'm not sure how often they practice drop goals, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's not a lot. Now, in contrast, against South Africa, the first drop goal was the result of a poor kick by Andre Pollard. They were set to launch one of their kick return plays, using Doris in his normal role. However, since the ball went short, Kieran Frawley just goes, I'll tell you what, I'm going to have a go. And he makes it. He's on the right side of the pitch, and it goes straight through the sticks. Then, the next drop goal that they run, that had a lot more structure and was clearly designed to get a drop goal opportunity. It starts off line-out ball, and here we can see Blade clearly look back. He has heard the call from Frawley. Frawley's on the right side of the pitch, he is ready to take the shot, and he has made sure Blade knows it. As such, we can see the players around the ruck start to get into position, ready for the shot. We can clearly see O'Mahony and Doris get back into position on the blind side with Beelum out of sight, and McCarthy and Osborne both on the open side. There is absolutely zero reason for a fullback to be here unless he's a blocker, and he is. The ball goes back to Frawley, aimed for his right side so he doesn't need to adjust, and is able to drop immediately, minimising the chance of being charged down. As we know, he isn't charged down. The ball goes over, and Ireland win an incredible game. I have to admit, this result and the way they earned it gave me quite a bit of admiration for Ireland. I don't know when the realisation about drop goals happened, whether it was the Leinster versus Toulouse game or the last minute against England-Ireland. However, Ireland have for a long time been a try-scoring team, same as Leinster. They have won so many games through their try-scoring ability, and as such, drop goals haven't really been considered. The last one they did was in 2018 against France in that game. They so easily could have gone into their multi-phase attack that's so efficient, but they didn't. Instead, They picked the winning option. They went outside of their DNA. They went to a strategy which was more likely to net them the win, and they got it. They found a way to win, and that's something to admire quite a lot. The one problem I see with the traditional setup, however, is that it's very easy to read. If we have a look at the Prem final, the second we see Finn Smith fall back into the pocket, he still has his blockers, but Bath know what's happening, and that is an inherent danger to this play. As it grows in popularity, more innovation will be needed to disguise what the attacking team is trying to do. Remember, the main objective of the drop goal is it allows you to take the game, to take the referee out of the game and to not have to rely on him to give you the penalty. That is what you want the drop goal to achieve. And yet, against South Africa, Ireland's setup very nearly got the referee involved and very nearly cost them. It was argued that the blockers were actively obstructing. They weren't. But the point is that on another day, this could seriously cost you the win, which is a key reason why deception is so key to drop goal routines going forward now. In the World Cup, Alex Mitchell pointed at his forward pods before he actually passed to George Ford to try and bait the Argentinian defence into going and fixating on them. This happened on a few occasions, but this isn't enough. A potential avenue for this is the old philosophy: the best time to hit is when they don't know it's coming. A good example of this is DC's drop goals, his snap drop goals, against Ireland and against South Africa. South Africa here think that the ball's going wide, but instead he just sends the ball straight over, rapidly drops it and sends it over. Against Samoa, Wilco comes in and drops a goal from the base of the ruck. Against France, his left boot is closed off, so he switches to his right. The innovation behind drop goals has already been extensive and all need to be considered. I mean, this is actually my play. The 9 passes to a pod with a second receiver behind him as the pullback. The pullback option has an attacking line off him, and catching the ball static baits the blitz in on them. Instead, he passes inside to his 10, positioned behind the original ruck, who now has time and space to make the drop. Another, suggested by Darren Reed, head coach of Wibble Rugby, was setting a drop goal off a caterpillar ruck to increase distance between the charge options and the 10. There are so many undiscovered approaches out there, but all of them are reliant on deception. If your opponent doesn't know what you're doing, that is the best defence against charge downs. Drop goals are more than just a means of winning tight games. They're invaluable for that, sure, but they're a means of denying defensive pressure, keeping the scoreboard ticking over, and making yourself a more complete team with more ways to win. They are an absolutely invaluable weapon, a weapon that has been so decisive in deciding the winners of tight competitions that we will talk about for many years to come. There have been so many times since the law changes that pick and goes and getting bogged down in the 22 has resulted in hold-ups and therefore a huge loss of momentum, with the defending team getting a goal line dropout or even a penalty in these tight, crunch, pressure games. In these games, where tries are few and points premium, it may be better to keep the scoreboard ticking over, and if you don't, you may regret that decision at the end of the game. The drop goal has made history. It has been responsible for the outcome of so many tight games across domestic and international competitions. It is a tool of champions. It is a tool of winners. And with this apparent revival, I can't wait to see what it can cause next. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed that. That was obviously a little bit of a different video than what you've probably had from me in the past. Not as analytical, not as in-depth, but as you can probably tell, you know, by no means any less important than anything I've really done. I really think that the drop goal is going to come back. You know, the tightness of, you know, the top teams in world rugby now and how close the margins are in games. You know, I think that, you know, bringing the drop goal back is an absolutely invaluable weapon and something that a lot of teams will get a lot of advantages from doing in honing that skill. I do need to say one thing though, because, you know, when I released the New England Way video, I was crucified for, like, you know, by some people for, you don't think attacking rugby can win, like, you totally discount everything else. And that is, like I said, nothing could be further from the truth. I've never said that. I do think attacking rugby, you know, of course, it has a huge place. I love attacking rugby. I love free-flowing rugby and great support lines and continuation of movement. However, what I'm talking about, the drop goal, it's used in a certain circumstance. You know, if you have broken the line, you have multiple support options, and you can take the ball through all the way to the try line, then of course you're going to do that. Of course. It's when the scramble defence has caught you and, you know, they've actually slowed the ball down and any opportunity is gone. I mean, if you can go one or two phases to still try and take the initiative from that break, then yeah, of course you will. But as the time and as the passage and the phases go on and the defence gets set and they get more aggressive and their mindset changes from scramble to, okay, let's dominate them and let's get the pen. At that point, especially against teams like South Africa, you have to ask, will we score the try? Or by carrying on doing this, are we likelier to concede and to like lose our momentum? As such, it's those circumstances when the attack's getting bogged down that I think that this is something, especially in the 22, that this is something to consider. Because at that point, you know, if they're being squeaky clean, they're not giving you anything, 5+ second rucks, that I think is a very good time to start thinking about honing the drop goal skills. But anyways, just wanted to say that because, like I say, love attacking rugby and I still maintain it's a huge portion of the game. But simultaneously, I still think when it's not quite working, you have to be able to take those points, which is what this video is about. Hope you enjoyed it. Yesterday was a pretty intense day getting this sorted, so I'm going to go down to the pub tonight, reward myself. But hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, guys, go well.